It's funny. We always talk about interest rates and investment strategies like it's all about the numbers.
Yeah, totally. Spreadsheets, calculators, the whole nine yards.
But isn't there more to it than that? Like, what about the psychology, the emotions behind our money decisions?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. We can try to make it all black and white, but there's a whole other side to money. How we think about it, how it makes us feel. That's where things get really interesting.
Right. So that's why today we're diving deep into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Love that book.
Yeah, me too. He really digs into those hidden forces that influence how we handle wealth.
It all starts with recognizing that our experiences with money are deeply personal.
Okay, so what do you mean by personal? Like everyone's got their own story.
Exactly. Imagine someone who grew up during, like, crazy hyperinflation, prices changing overnight.
Wild.
Right. They're going to have
Right.
a totally different view on something like, say, bonds than someone who's only lived through stable prices.
Makes sense. Their whole reference point is different.
Totally. And those experiences, they build up these biases, these lenses we see the financial world through, and they feel totally rational to us, even if they seem strange to somebody else. It's fascinating.
It's true. I never thought about it like that. You know what else House talks about that I found really interesting? It's that anecdote about Bill Gates and his friend Kent Evans.
Oh, yeah. Powerful story.
Really makes you think about how much our personal histories can impact us.
For sure. So for those who don't know, Kent Evans was this brilliant friend of Bill Gates back in high school,
Yeah.
just as passionate about computers. They even got a contract together to, like, build their school's class scheduling system.
Hold on. In high school.
Seriously, they were coding whiz kids. Sadly, Evans died young in a mountain climbing accident. It's tragic, and it just makes you wonder, what if he'd lived?
Right. Would we be talking about Microsoft as the Bill and Kent empire today?
Exactly. Gates obviously worked insanely hard, don't get me wrong, but it just highlights how much luck, how much chance plays into what we call success.
It's humbling, for sure. You can't control everything.
You can't. And that's okay. It's like, it's not about discounting hard work, just acknowledging that sometimes things don't go our way. And that's all right. And when they do go well, maybe be a little extra grateful. Because sometimes those what-if scenarios, they're closer than we think.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like that saying, we make plans and God laughs. And speaking of long-term plans, one of the things Housel talks about that always gets me is the power of compounding. It seems so simple, but the effects are mind-blowing.
Compounding is amazing. It's like you're not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. You're just being consistent. Small efforts, but over time, boom.
It's like that old saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And House uses Warren Buffett as an example. Like, you might think there's this big secret to his success, but a huge part of it is just the length of his career. Over 70 years of investing.
70 years. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
That's compounding in action. Even if he wasn't the investor he is, with that much time, the returns would be incredible. It really shows the power of time in the market.
And it's not just investing either, right? It's like learning a new skill, building a business, even relationships.
You got it. Small, consistent efforts, that's the key. Brick by brick, you build something amazing.
So true. Now, how can we, as listeners, actually put that into practice? Especially with something as, let's be honest, kind of daunting as money.
Well, Housel uses this comparison I really like. He says saving money is like energy efficiency. And I know that might sound kind of weird at first, but just stay with me for a sec. So back in the 70s, remember the energy crisis? Everyone was freaking out.
Oh, yeah, big time. Gas lines, the whole deal.
Right. And back then, the focus was all about finding new sources of oil. Like, gotta find more, gotta find more.
Yeah, everyone thought we were going to run out.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is that we actually made huge GE progress by focusing on using the energy we already had more efficiently.
Huh. Interesting. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, we started making more fuel-efficient cars. We designed homes and appliances that use less power. It was a total shift in mindset.
So instead of always looking for more energy, we got smarter about how we use what we had.
Exactly. And the impact was massive. Think about it. The U.S. economy has grown a ton since like the 1950s, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But get this. We actually use less energy per dollar of GDP now than we did back then. We've become way more efficient.
Wow. That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Right. And so bringing it back to saving money, think of it this way. We only have so much energy, just like we only have so much income coming in every month.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Right. And just like discovering some massive new oil field is like totally outside of our control.
Right.
So are things like investment returns. You just never know what's going to happen.
The market can be unpredictable for sure.
Totally. Global events, pandemics, who knows? There are so many factors we can't control.
But saving, well, that's something we do have control over. Just like we can choose to buy a more fuel-efficient car.
100%. It's about focusing on what you can directly influence, instead of always chasing that next hot stock tip.
Which, let's be honest, rarely works out the way you hope.
Exactly. Focus on consistently putting money aside. It might not sound as sexy, but it's the foundation.
Brick by brick, right?
You got it. Now, I know we keep talking about this long-term view, which is super important.
Right.
But there's another thing Housel says that I really connect with. He says that when it comes to money, sometimes reasonable beats rational.
Reasonable over rational. Okay, now you got to break that down for me.
Yeah, so like in a perfect world, we'd all follow this perfectly rational financial plan. You know, the one with all the complicated equations, optimized for max returns.
Yeah, like something you'd learn at a finance MBA program.
Totally. But here's the thing. Those super rational approaches, they often require this like emotional detachment that most people just don't have.
Yeah, I could see that.
You got to be willing to take on huge risks sometimes, ride out those crazy market swings. It can be a wild ride.
Not for the faint of heart.
Definitely not. And so Housel's point is that it's often better to find a strategy that's reasonable, even if it's not perfectly rational on paper. Something you can understand, something you're comfortable with, and most importantly, something you can stick with even when things get tough.
So it's about finding that balance between what makes sense in theory and what you can actually handle emotionally.
Exactly. Like he gives this great example of a study about using leverage to juice your retirement savings.
Leverage, meaning borrowing money. That sounds a little scary.
Right. And the study found that, yeah, in theory, leverage could lead to higher returns. But, and this is a big but, it only works if you can stomach watching your portfolio tank during a crash and not freak out and sell everything.
Which, let's be real, most people would probably do.
Totally. It's just not realistic for most people. So even though it might be rational from a pure number standpoint, it's not reasonable in the real world where we're all human and we have feelings.
It's about knowing yourself and your limits, right?
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of things that can really mess with our emotions, Housel also talks about this weird thing we do, our tendency to focus on the negative, even when it's not the full picture.
You know, it's true. It's like we're drawn to bad news. If it bleeds, it leads, right? But why are we like that?
It's kind of wild when you think about it. Our brains are wired to pay attention to the scary stuff. It's a survival thing, right?
Totally makes sense from like an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always serve us in the modern world.
Definitely not. And Housel calls this narrative damage. Like we get so caught up in the negative stories, we miss the bigger picture.
Narrative damage. I like that. Give me an example.
Okay, so remember back in 2008, after the whole financial meltdown?
Yeah, how could I forget?
Everyone was freaking out, understandably. And there were all these predictions about like peak oil, the end of economic growth, the whole shebang.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was pretty doom and gloom for a while there.
Exactly. And it was easy to buy into that narrative, for sure. But you know what those predictions missed?
What's that?
Innovation. Like that's when we saw this huge boom in things like fracking technology, which actually increased oil production. The market adapted, found new solutions, even though it was tough to see at the time.
So it's like we can get so focused on the problem that we miss the solutions being created right in front of us.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that things aren't always as bleak as they seem.
Don't let pessimism blind you to the good stuff, right?
Exactly. Okay, ready for another big idea from the book? This one's super relatable.
Get me.
It's about the power of stories, specifically the stories we tell ourselves about money.
Oh, man, that is so true. We all have those little voices in our heads, don't we?
All the time. And those stories, those beliefs we have about wealth, about our own ability to manage money, they have a huge impact on the decisions we make, often more than we realize.
It's like our brains are wired for storytelling. Right?
Totally. It helps us make sense of the world. And Housel, he has this great thought experiment where he imagines an alien visiting Earth.
Okay, I love a good thought experiment.
So this alien, he visits Earth in 2007, right before the whole financial crisis hits. And then he comes back again in 2009 after the crash. And he's totally baffled.
Why is that?
Because to him, nothing has really changed. Like the buildings are still there, people are still going about their lives, the fundamentals of the economy are largely the same.
But the stories has changed. The feeling is totally different.
Exactly. In 2007, everyone's optimistic, spending like crazy. By 2009, it's all fear and panic. Same underlying reality, totally different narrative.
It's incredible how much our perception can shape reality, isn't it?
It really is. And it shows how these stories we tell ourselves, these beliefs about money, they're not always based on like objective truth.
It's about becoming aware of those stories, right?
Right?
Questioning them.
Exactly. Like, are they empowering me or holding me back? Are they even true?
It's like we have the power to rewrite the script if we want to.
Exactly. And that's what I love about the psychology of money. It's not about giving you this one-size-fits-all plan to get rich. It's about understanding your relationship with money.
It's about self-awareness as much as it is about interest rates and investment strategies.
100%.
Yeah.
Because once you have that self-awareness, you can start making choices that actually align with your values. Money is a tool, right? It's not good or bad on its own. It's all about how we choose to use it.
And we've seen how those choices are influenced by so much more than just logic and spreadsheets.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Our past experiences, those hidden biases we talked about, the stories we believe in, it all plays a role. But once we understand those influences, we can start to make decisions from a more, empowered place.
It's like shining a light on those blind spots we all have.
Exactly. Like, it helps explain why people do things that might seem irrational on the surface.
Like why people still buy lottery tickets.
Yes, it's the dream. That little voice saying, what if?
Or why someone might choose a job that pays a little less, but gives them more flexibility, more time with their family.
There you go. They're prioritizing something other than just maximizing their income, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But it's not always something that's talked about in those typical financial planning conversations.
It's like we forget that we're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. We're human beings with hopes and dreams and fears and all these experiences that shape how we see the world.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that, it's just as important as understanding how compound interest works.
Could have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the psychology of money, I think the big takeaway here is that it's not just about mastering the technical stuff, it's about mastering our own minds.
It really is. It's about defining what success looks like for you, not what some guru or influencer tells you it should be.
It's about finding that sweet spot between being smart with your money and also living a life that feels good, that feels aligned with what you value most.
Because at the end of the day, that's what true wealth is all about. It's not just about the size of your bank account. It's about the richness of your life.
Couldn't agree more. It's about finding that freedom, that sense of enough. Thanks for diving deep with us. Until next time.